I got a little nugget for you right out of the gates here on KCMO Talk Radio. If you're one of our early birds, you'll get that before anybody else here over the next couple of minutes. And it ties into this story I want to kick off the show with. Good morning. Happy spring. Happy Tuesday. It is awesome, as always, to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM. So, crime on the Plaza. Headline story yesterday from KCTV5. And I give them credit. I give KCTV5 credit for highlighting this. And I also give the people who spoke to KCTV5 credit for talking about this. Let's go to the Sunset Hut. The Sunglass Hut right down there on the plaza where they sell sunglasses for your sunsets. See what I did there to make it come full circle? Anyway, there have been a lot of issues at the Sunglass Hut on the plaza. The biggest issue has been, of course, stealing sunglasses. And an employee went off camera and spoke to KCTV5 about the plethora of issues they've been having at the Sunglass Hut over the last few weeks.
It's a little nerve-wracking for sure.
Sunglass Hut has become a target on the Country Club Plaza.
There may be times where someone comes in and you get hit and it's just you.
This employee wanted to remain anonymous because he's concerned for his safety, but says within the last month, their store has been hit at least 6 times.
We'll have people come in, particularly when it's busy and we can't keep good track of them, and they'll move around the store very quickly and just grab 1 or 2 pairs. That happened just last week.
So you hear a mention there multiple times in the last few weeks. They've had guys just stroll in, take sunglasses, and walk out. And on top of that, you do have getaway cars, which that employee spoke about off camera, where he's got serious concerns that even when he walks up to people and he tries to say, well, I'm not sure that guy's really here to buy sunglasses, he'll walk up to him and they'll either leave the store or, as he noted in this package to KCTV5, they'll just continue on and steal the sunglasses anyway, with an employee standing right next to them. What does that tell you? People in this town that are going to commit crimes, whether it's stealing sunglasses or shooting people at Super Bowl parades, they do not have any fear of consequences. There are none in this town. And then there was also this conversation in this KCTV5 package with a guy named Jamie Birdnow. And he does a lot of business on the plaza. And this is exactly what this town needs right now. If the Chamber of Commerce clowns aren't going to do it, and we know they're not, they're scared to death. They just want to play nice. They just want to be everybody's friend. That's all they want to do. If the Chamber of Commerce folks are not going to look out for their own members, then you know what it's going to take? It is going to take run-of-the-mill workers, run-of-the-mill business owners to step up, talk to the media, come on shows like this, and talk about how the crime is rampant, the crime is out of control, and by the way, the crime is not getting covered enough by the media, and I'll include myself in that. We talk about it a lot, of course, but do we talk about it enough? Do we know every little piece of crime that's happening on the plaza? No, we don't. So here's more from KCTV5.
It really makes me angry, to be honest with you.
Jamie Birdnow shares the same frustration as he's done business on the plaza for 20 years.
We shouldn't be quiet about this. I don't think a lot of people know how often things like shootings or robberies and that sort of thing happen down on the plaza.
But he's hopeful new management will turn things around.
When they come in, I hope they really listen to the folks that are down here and sort of take what our experience has been.
I reached out to the mayor's office to see when this might happen. In a statement, they said, quote, the Country Club Plaza is an important part of Kansas City's past, present, and future, and Mayor Lucas is committed to ensuring it continues to grow and improve. The city continues to have weekly discussions with the potential new owners about how to revive the plaza and remains hopeful positive change is on the horizon.
Passing the buck much, huh? Yeah, can't do much about the crime on the plaza until, we get those new owners in here. I don't think we got a chance until we get the new guys in town. Well, here's my tidbit that I teased for you as we started off the show. I am hearing that the deal with the Dallas company, HP Village Partners, could be slowly falling apart, and it may fall through. Not saying it will, but I'm starting to hear that it may be on the fritz, shall we say. So that would be a horrible thing for the Plaza. But the idea that somehow we're going to sit here and say, yeah, the crime, I really hope the new owners come through, as if the city doesn't have a responsibility for the streets on the Plaza? What is that all about? I mean, they're clearly responsible. It's still your city. I know you might not own it. I know the new owners and Plaza ownership right now does have individuals who patrol, but let's be honest, they're rent-a-cops. Those guys have their pants around their ankles. They're staring at their phones. They don't give a crap. They're not actually cops. You still need to police the Plaza. And the mayor's office with that statement was totally passing the buck. But I got to give credit to that guy, Jamie Bird now, because what you've seen is way too many business owners afraid to talk about the same issues that they've been dealing with now over the last few years. Especially, I like when he said here, I mean, I hate that he said this, but I like when he said, I don't think a lot of people know how often things like shootings and robberies are happening down here. And he's right. In large part, we don't know how many of those things are happening down there. I mean, we hear when we hear them on the news, but how many do we not hear about? So it's something that's got to get cleaned up. The Plaza is not going to be saved by this group out of Dallas as long as you have a situation where bad guys in Kansas City do not care about the consequences. They don't fear the consequences. And that's where we find ourselves right now, John.
Remember when protesters came down to the Plaza and they were throwing stuff at the cops?
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that.
And then so when they got cited,
yes.
Then what happened? Our city council said, come on.
Drop the charges.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So in a left-handed way, doesn't this prove we don't want local control of the police?
Yeah, I would say so.
And the city council and their one opportunity, I guess?
To prove they were tough on crime, they dropped the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. Never forget that.
So don't let anybody tell you that state controls the reason the crime is out of control on the Plaza, right?
No.
Right.
No way.
Right.
If you don't remember the story, maybe you're new to the show on 95.7 FM. During the chaos of 2020, all the people who got cited during those riots, their charges, if they were low-level charges, were dropped by the city council. Not by a judge, not by a court. The city council just basically said, we're sympathetic to your protests, so we're going to drop the charges. In one of the most ridiculous things that a city council has ever done. So you're absolutely right to bring that up, John, and we're still reaping what we sowed from those times of 2020. It's sad, but it's very much true. So as we get the morning started, Police Chief Stacey Graves of Kansas City, Missouri, is going to be here at 7:05 this morning. So just after the top of the hour, Stacey Graves, 7:05, right here on KCMO 95.7 FM. And if you're not in the car then, make sure you're streaming us on the iHeart or KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up next, one of our own, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, got together with Elon Musk last night. Yeah, they did a little mano-a-mano chat. I also heard Andrew Bailey early this morning. He was on the Fox News Rundown. So we'll play for you some of what Andrew Bailey and Elon Musk talked about last night. And as it relates to Missouri, that's coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Maybe it was censored by Grandpa or something. I don't know.
Come on, man.
I'm just saying, you never know these days. Follow the KCMO Talk Radio Facebook page for all the latest information, what's happening in town. I'm on Facebook as well. Pete Mundo on KCMO. But right now, the state of Missouri is at the center of the conversation when it comes to federal government overreach with social media and with big tech. And interestingly, yesterday I saw that Attorney General Andrew Bailey in Missouri did a Twitter space, which is basically a sit-down conversation, audio only, kind of like a radio conversation with Elon Musk, of course, the now owner of formerly Twitter, now X. And they were talking about yesterday's moments at the Supreme Court where Missouri, and this was filed under former Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Now that torch is being carried by current Attorney General Andrew Bailey. And the state of Louisiana is also involved with this. And what they're doing is they're basically going after the Biden administration for suppressing speech on big tech social media platforms as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccine back in 2021. That's where this all stems from. The case was originally called Missouri v. Biden. Now it's called Murphy v. Missouri. And in this case, basically how we got here is 2 federal courts ruled against the federal government. The U.S. District Court for the Western District of Louisiana and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So that's how this ended up in the Supreme Court. And both courts issued rulings limiting the Biden administration's contact with social media companies. The Supreme Court, which is hearing this case right now, has put those orders on hold until after it makes its decision. So the Supreme Court's hearing this case right now. And before we get to Elon Musk and Andrew Bailey, I want to play a clip from Ketanji Brown Jackson, Joe Biden's star appointment on the Supreme Court, and just give you a little taste of what exactly some of these Supreme Court justices were saying yesterday as it relates to the government and whether or not it should be allowed to tell big tech and tell social media companies what they want you saying, what they want you posting, and what they want you sharing. Listen to how dangerous this is. And I don't care what your political beliefs are. It's irrelevant. I don't care what you think about anything. I mean, if you think that Kansas is going to win the national championship this year, long shot. But if you think that, this matters to you. If you're a sports fan, this is not about like hardcore politics. This is just about whether or not you think the government should be allowed to play a role in what kind of speech you put up on your own social media platforms. You got a hot take for me?
Well, quick example to say, hey, the Chiefs are going to three-peat. Well, oh, no, fact check.
Yeah.
That's not ever happened before.
Yeah.
Right? You can't say that.
Biden's an Eagles fan. He won't allow that speech on Facebook. Right? He's still butthurt over the Super Bowl loss. All right, so here's Ketanji Brown Jackson. Listen to this from a Supreme Court justice questioning whether your right to free speech, the First Amendment, might go just a little too far.
Justice Jackson?
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods.
Wait. Your First Amendment right hamstrings the government? That's the point of the First Amendment, to hamstring the damn government. Are you kidding me? Ketanji Brown Jackson? I'm very concerned. And this ties back to COVID, by the way. This all goes back to 2021. The vaccine comes out, and the administration was not wild about some social media posts regarding the vaccine that were out there. That, by the way, some of them at least probably turned out to be true. So you have a Supreme Court justice concerned that your right to free speech could hamper the goals of the government. Is that not Orwellian? Or is that not Orwellian? Let's continue with the fine Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
What would you have the government do? I've heard you say a couple times that the government can post its own speech, but in my hypothetical, kids, this is not safe, don't do it, is not going to get it done. And so I guess some might say that the government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country, and you seem to be suggesting that that duty cannot manifest itself in the government encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information.
The government has a duty to protect you. And if we are not allowed to do our jobs as the almighty federal government, well, by golly, who's going to do the job? Because the government obviously is always looking out for your best interests. Wink, wink, nod, nod, says Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court yesterday.
So can you help me? Because I'm really worried about that. Because you've got the First Amendment operating. in an environment of threatening circumstances from the government's perspective, and you're saying that the government can't interact with the source of those problems.
The government cannot interact with the source of those problems, and the problems are your speech on Facebook, John.
Juxtapose social media with the border.
Yeah.
Your duty to protect me is at the border, not on social media.
Not on X or Facebook or Snapchat.
No one is stopping you from engaging with the enemy and the threat there.
Wow. Think about what Ketanji Brown Jackson just said on the First Amendment. Is that not one of the most chilling things a Supreme Court justice could say when it comes to your rights and free speech? So last night, Elon Musk had a conversation with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, who, by the way, will be on this show at 8 o'clock this morning to talk about his conversation with Elon Musk last night. Here's part of what the two talked about.
My view of the Constitution is that it exists to protect us from the government.
Yes, and absolutely.
So the fact that it is hamstringing, the First Amendment hamstrings the government's ability to censor free speech is a good thing. And she almost characterized it as a bad thing. And yet the legacy again ignores that headline altogether in favor of talking about how skeptical the justices were of this coercion argument.
Yeah, the whole point of the Constitution is to constrain the power of government, and so that it does not turn against the people. And that's also something where, people come here from other countries where they were used to an extremely coercive government, where they didn't just lack freedom of speech, but they lacked many freedoms. And that's why you have the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, because one of the other things that people had in the countries they came from is that they weren't allowed to have guns, because the way to suppress the population is to control the news and make sure that the population has no guns. And the point at which you control the flow of information and you have the weapons, you control the people.
That's Andrew Bailey, Missouri's Attorney General, and Elon Musk talking about this case that was heard at the Supreme Court yesterday. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but it's Missouri and Louisiana going after and going at the Biden administration for suppressing speech on social media during 2021, during COVID. And we'll see how it plays out. And the Attorney General is going to be here coming up at 8 o'clock. Coming up, a Liberty student was beat up by the bus driver. We got the details coming up. Young teenage boys pissing off the bus driver. The tale as old as time.
That was a professional.
That doesn't shock me one bit. Meantime, Mark was totally a goody two-shoes on the bus, weren't you, Mark? I could see it in your eyes.
I walked to school.
Okay.
So I never had to ride a bus.
I never did either because our town was just too small to have the bus. So I never was on a bus. I mean, outside of like a field trip. But in terms of the daily, day-to-day, I also didn't ride the bus. So John's taking the cake in terms of being the badass on the back of the bus. That was John Anthony. And we love that about him. John's got
Eventually you grow up.
Yeah, but not too soon. Not too soon.
Not at 14 and 15.
No. So let's go to Liberty, where a substitute bus driver has been arrested and fired after he was accused of assaulting a middle schooler. This was last Thursday, Heritage Middle School in Liberty. Scott Livingston, 67 years old, charged with misdemeanor fourth-degree assault and booked into the Clay County Detention Center. He was later released on a $500 bond. So the victim's parents met with KCTV5. Nicole Dana and Brad Carroll say they are still in shock about what happened to their son. Let's take a listen to what they're saying to KCTV5 and then get your reaction at 913-408-7957.
He was helpless. There was nothing he could do. He had a grown adult on top of him, choking him and punching him repeatedly in his face. No child should have to go through that.
Thursday afternoon, Nicole Dana and Brad Carroll lived a nightmare. Their 7th grade son, Zachary, a student at Heritage Middle School in Liberty, called them with news that no parent can imagine.
He said, "Mom, I just got assaulted by the bus driver. I was choked and punched multiple times."
Zachary still has cuts to his face and neck and no longer wants to ride the bus to school. One of Zach's friends captured the final moments of the assault, and you can hear other children on the bus screaming.
Jacob, do something! Do something! Jacob!
It's infuriating. I mean, never should a child ever experience being, assaulted by an adult, period.
It was heartbreaking. I mean, I wasn't there to protect my child, and for an adult that is so much older and should know better to abuse our child like that is not okay.
Although the bus driver was arrested and fired, Brad and Nicole want more from the school district. They suggest stricter background checks at a minimum.
Everybody's kids' lives are in their hands whenever they get on the bus. So, I mean, just do more of a background check. Because, I mean, you want to know who your kids are riding with. You want them to be safe no matter what.
All right, that's courtesy of KCTV5, the parents of the kid who was allegedly beat up by 67-year-old Scott Livingston. His mugshot is on the local TV stations. Can I say something that I don't know if you'll view this as taboo? No, a grown man should never, hit a child. No, a grown man on a school bus should never hit a kid. But is it possible, just possible, the kid was being a punk? Is it possible that you do not justify a kid getting hit by a bus driver, but is it possible that the kid, according to court documents, who was being told to sit down by the bus driver and then said, finally, sit down or I'm going to beat your ass, he then the kid replied and said, "You can't touch me." Livingston then went back to the bus and grabbed his jacket. The victim then said, "Get your bleeping hands off me." He said the driver put his hands around his neck and squeezed. The victim stood up and pushed the driver into the seat across from them. The student said the driver then flipped him over and began hitting him per court documents. Another student was able to stop Livingston until a district security officer arrived. The district security officer removed the victim from the bus. There's no defending a grown man hitting a child. There isn't. I'm never going to do that. But there is something to be said in an era when it seems like, in a time when it seems like parents do nothing but say, "Oh, not my kid. Oh, my kid would never do fill in the blank." We don't really teach personal responsibility. I mean, this guy, this adult should, yes, be held personally responsible. There's no doubt about it. He's been charged with multiple counts, with multiple things that he's going to have to face in a court of law. And I'm not against him facing those things and those consequences. But there's also something to be said, and it's only gotten worse in the wake of COVID when kids weren't in school. They don't listen to authority. They don't do what they're told to do by their adults who are in charge and around them to say, hey, stop being a punk. And I know kids have been punks since the beginning of time, since John Anthony was a punk on the back of the school bus.
Circa 1960.
Yeah. I mean, ever since then and prior. Kids have been punks.
I was an apprentice. There were guys ahead of me that I learned from. So even further back. So yeah, ever since school buses have been driving down roads, there's been backseat drivers.
There have been backseat drivers and there have been punks on the school bus. But I'll tell you right now, sometimes everybody's a little bit in the wrong. And it wouldn't shock me if that was part of what happened here. And that's not defending an adult beating a kid. But let's be honest. Sometimes the kid needs a smack across the mouth, but it should come from another kid, not an adult. That's what needs to happen.
Well, there's peer pressure, you bet.
Yeah.
I'm going to go higher up on the 30,000-foot view here. It's
Please.
Like you can't have more strict requirements. I'll bet every district in this metro area is looking for bus drivers.
Well, you're right.
Now, my solution would be it's tough enough to drive one of those freaking things around and make the corner without clipping the curb without 30 little, what's, in the backseat screaming in your ear, fighting, disturbances. So it would seem that it would behoove people to have a monitor, a second person. Now, we can't even hire enough drivers, so I don't see having monitors, a second or third person on the bus, as feasible.
I don't either.
If I'm the school district, I just can buses.
Wow. Wow.
Well, the fuel costs.
Yeah.
If you can't hire enough people and the kids won't mind, I mean, I didn't have seatbelts when I was on the bus when I was a kid. They didn't have them on there. I think they do now, so I don't know why the kid wasn't set down with the seatbelt.
Here's the thing. I would actually be open to that. Like, I'll give you a great example. You mentioned they can't hire bus drivers.
Yep.
Mark and I live in Olathe. You know the issues there, right? They're pushing back school next year because they don't have enough bus drivers for all the schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're changing all the times around.
They're moving all the times around. So where our kids will go to school, where Claire will go to school starting next year, she will take a bus. But if you are within, I don't know if it's a mile or a mile and a half as the crow flies, you can't get on the bus. And from what I hear, it's it takes you like a half hour to an hour to pick up your kid. So if you were to take the buses away, I mean, you would have 2-hour pickup lines. You couldn't do it. I agree with what John's saying in theory, because it's kind of like, you know what? Get your own kid to school. I know we do it as a public service, but get your kid to school. Make sure they're there on time. That's how I grew up in my small town. There were no school buses. There was none of that. You just kind of got to school on time, and that was that. You could walk. Maybe you drove, maybe a sibling drove, maybe a parent drove, but that was it. But I don't think it's feasible because of how these schools were built where you would have 2-hour pickup lines.
School ends at 3:40. I went to an event at 2:15 at my daughter's school, and there was somebody, the first person was already there waiting in line.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
It's crazy.
That's crazy. 913-408-7957. John's in Green Valley. John, you're first up. What's up, brother?
Well, it's nice to be first up. Thank you. Now, I kind of see what you're going, but I think the lesson here for this kid and a lot of kids is when you say, you can't put your hands on me, oh, yes, I can, and that thing is called life, and it's going to put its hands on you, and you just learned it young. You get these kids, they want to sit there and go, you can't touch me. Well, how'd that work out for you, buddy? Not too good. And this heartbreaking, heart-wrenching story, which is going to ruin my day now, about this kid, like out of nowhere, this bus driver, for no reason whatsoever, just got up and started pounding this kid after asking him so politely to sit down. I want to know the first 15 minutes before that.
Yes.
Because I kind of agree with you. You watch these videos, you watch these things, the way some of these kids act toward adults, the outright disrespect. And they sit there and go, you can't touch me. Well, guess what? You got touched, buddy.
John, thank you. On the text line, our bus drivers would hit the brakes real hard if somebody was standing up and refused to sit down and take their little butt for a ride.
Oh, yeah, I learned negative reinforcement is a great thing, but we're trying to outlaw that.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Well, we are. On the text line, Pete, make the kids walk, save the environment, Green New Deal.
See, that's another thing. We would get kicked off the bus.
Yeah.
And I don't know they can do that now either.
Well, you're right. You get your butt sued.
Kicked off the bus on the route. Walk home from here.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Several people have been disboarded.
Every attorney in town would be looking to pick up that suit.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was useful and practical back in the day.
Well, that ties into what John's talking about, what John in Green Valley was just talking about, you know? 913-408-7957. This kid in Liberty got beat up by the bus driver. I think it's a little more gray than simply black and white. And there's a lot of angles to talk about on this. We'll continue it with you. Who's in the right, who's in the wrong. And then Police Chief Stacey Graves, Kansas City, Missouri. She will join me at 7:05. Do not miss that right here on KCMO 95.7 FM. I thought I'd be in the minority here, but apparently not. This kid got beat up by a bus driver. As the story goes, 67-year-old Scott Livingston is facing charges after he allegedly hit a student riding the bus. He's being charged with misdemeanor fourth-degree assault in Clay County. According to court documents, last Thursday, officers dispatched to South Leonard and Groom Streets in Liberty. Court documents say officers located and stopped the school bus. While the bus doors opened, students ran off the bus. Documents say the incident started near Heritage Middle School. Livingston approached the victim, grabbing his shirt around the collar. Placed his hand around the victim's neck, prosecutors say. Victim stood up and began defending himself. According to court documents, the victim said the bus driver yelled to the back of the bus, said, "Sit down or I'm going to beat your ass." He replied and said, "You can't touch me." Livingston went to the back of the bus and allegedly grabbed his jacket. The student's parents have spoken to KCTV5, and I'm sitting here and I'm saying, no, adults should not hit kids, clearly. However, we continue to live in a society where kids have zero respect for anybody or anything, never mind adults. They just don't. And I say that as someone who's trying to raise 3 decent kids. So on the text line, 913-408-7957, Pete, I used to be a bus driver. I just drove the route and let the kids do whatever they wanted. Dispatch watched all the cameras, dealt with the punishments. I never wanted to get involved in case I did something wrong and got fired or worse. Pete, my wife, was a bus driver for the city of Olathe. The kids are little monsters. The junior high kids are the absolute worst, followed by the high school kids. Thankfully, she got out of that and started busing special needs kids, which she loved very much. This falls back on the parents. And here's the other thing I'll say about the parents. If you're the parents and you're running to local TV to cry, which is what these parents did, that tells me something too.
He was helpless. There was nothing he could do. He had a grown adult on top of him, choking him and punching him repeatedly in his face.
I'm not here, and that's to KCTV5, the mom and the dad, to once again say an adult should hit a kid. Shouldn't. But man, there's more to it. There oftentimes is. And if you're the parents who are running to local media to say boo-hoo, that tells me a lot about how you've raised your kids as well. Let's go to Neil. He's in Kansas City. What's up, Neil? You're on KCMO. Good morning.
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, brother. What's happening?
Hey, man, I just want to kind of touch base on this. I'm with you. It shouldn't have happened. I get it. But, I'd like to know what happened prior to that, what's going on, all that. To me, this is a clear case of F around and find out. And the kid F'd around and found out.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yeah.
it shouldn't have happened. I get that. But, here's the thing. These kids, it's not only, well, you can't do nothing to me because, you're an adult, whatever. I get that. But there's no consequences. Even actions that weren't this dramatic to what this kid did, there's no consequences for anything, and these kids know that these days.
Mm-hmm.
I work for a school district. I'm not going to say which one it is, but I see it every day. I'm in like 60 different buildings, and I see it from third grade through high school, and and you say since COVID, I get it, since COVID, but man, it's been progressing for the past probably 10 years. I mean, I've seen it just get worse and worse, and it's getting worse and worse by the year, I see, Pete. And it's like, and that's what it is. These kids, I see it on the daily, man. They will do something, they'll be defiant, or they'll break something. I see them breaking windows. I talked to your guy earlier. 2 years ago, I saw, with my own eyes, I saw a gentleman. He was probably maybe a junior probably, and took a girl by the shoulders and literally just smashed her through some wire glass, like just pushed her through a wire glass window. I mean, I watched it. I was 10 feet away from it. And I was like, oh, my God. And it took 30 minutes for an admin to even come down to, like, where we were at. And I was, like, getting ready to head out because my day was almost over. I walked up into the security office, and the SRO was just up there, like, had his feet up on the bench watching Jeopardy. I'm like, a girl just got, pushed through a window.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I was getting ready to head down there. I'm like, well, were you? And then, like, nothing. I don't think anything ever happened with that kid. Like,
yeah, listen, Neil, I think I appreciate the call, and I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of just the de-evolution in terms of raising children. I mean, I'm trying to raise 3 myself, and listen, we're not all perfect, and we all make mistakes. But dang, it does seem like it's gotten worse. There's no doubt about it. On the text line, 913-408-7957, Free Scott hashtag. That's the bus driver. Yeah. Also on the text line, kids have no respect. He deserved it. I'll pay the bus driver's bail. John in Liberty, real quick. John, what's up, brother?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Local teacher, not in Liberty. But there's a huge cycle of issues here that you could just talk about for days. And so when you think about these kids, especially middle school and high school, coming into your classroom, you have assignments for them. 75% of the class won't do the assignment because there's no accountability or consequences. And so you're constantly trying to inspire and motivate, have conversations. But the fact of the matter is, many of the kids, 18% of the population are already homeless, right? So when they get to our school, all they care about is getting 3 meals, and then they're worried about where are they going to sleep at night, right? So you think about that's a percentage of that population. That's going to bring quite a bit of challenges. The other thing I want to hit on real quick is when you try to enforce some form of accountability, you may send them to the office. Guess where they go right after that? They come right back to your classroom within 30 seconds, right? And so there is no consequences. There is no accountability. You've got 38, 40 kids in a classroom with one teacher trying to manage that. No wonder teachers are they're hopping out of education, and there's a huge shortage of teachers. And so you're getting unqualified teachers getting into that education cycle as well. There's just a myriad of challenges that you could talk about for weeks.
John, that is very well said, John. Thanks for your job and what you're doing teaching. And this is a microcosm of, you're right, a much bigger issue, and that is the continued collapse, and I hate to say this, of public education. It's not all that debatable. The Chiefs are in charge of dragging little brother across the finish line here. That's just reality. The Royals have the much more controversial part of this vote, which is 2 weeks from today. And by the way, our buddy Nick Haynes is going to be here at 8:50 because tonight at the Kansas City Public Library, there will be a forum taking place that Nick Haynes is going to moderate on the pro and the no side of the vote coming up on April 2nd to take a 3/8 cent sales tax, continue it for another 40 years to help the Chiefs upgrade Arrowhead Stadium and the Royals move their stadium downtown. But the Chiefs obviously have a tall task here. They have got to drag the Royals across the finish line. Because as I was asked by multiple people at the Big 12 tournament on Friday, hey, what if these were separate ballot issues? Well, it's a no-brainer. The Chiefs side would pass. One, because, yes, they've won 2 Super Bowls, but maybe just as important is the fact that their ask is much less controversial. We want to upgrade Arrowhead. And who doesn't love Arrowhead Stadium outside of the opposing teams? The Royals are the ones who obviously have struggled, have lost 100 games, have, not been in the playoff conversation for the better part of a decade now, and are also looking to go downtown. And not just downtown, but the more controversial option downtown, the Crossroads, not the East Village. So if these were 2 separate ballot issues, well, the Chiefs would pass and the Royals would probably go down in flames. So now they've got them on the ballot together. And now it's up to the Chiefs to try to drag them across the finish line. And that's not me being, unfair to the Royals. I think the Royals secretly, privately, whatever you want to say, would admit as much. But it's the Chiefs who are now sticking their neck out here on behalf of the Royals and saying, hey, who knows? If this doesn't pass, we might move. Mark Donovan said as much to Woke 41 last week.
Could the Royals leave Kansas City, Missouri?
I can't answer that for the Royals. I just know that for us, the Chiefs, we would have to look at all of our options.
Do those options include leaving Kansas City, Missouri?
I think they would have to include leaving Kansas City, but our goal here is that we want to stay here. And we're willing to accept a deal, which is actually better for the county to stay.
All right, so that was Mark Donovan. He's taking the slings and the arrows on behalf of the Royals by saying, hey, who knows? We don't pass. Who knows where we end up? Now, do I buy that? No. Do I think you should believe that? No, not really. I mean, even if you're just vote yes. I'm not endorsing either side of this, but just go ahead and vote yes because you think it's a good deal. Like yesterday I was telling you how I was at the Big 12 tournament, and anecdotally speaking, I probably got asked by 10 to 15 people how I'm voting. Now, I'm not a Jackson County resident, so I'm not voting. But I'm like, listen, I'm just talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of each side of this. I'm not staking my claim out on either side. So then I say, how are you voting? And I met one person who was voting yes. So I got a text from a couple of folks yesterday in town, and they said out of their 15 to 20 friends, they say there's only one no vote. And I basically asked why. I said, I don't care. I'm just curious why. And they all admitted that they don't want to give their money to billionaire owners, but as a bunch of KC natives, they don't want to lose their sports teams. So they're literally willing to give this money over to billionaire franchises out of fear of potentially losing a team. And listen, I get it. We've seen markets of this size, including Kansas City, lose teams over the years. We understand the history, but I think there's a little bit of trickery going on here. The teams are not looking to leave. They're not. I mean, the Hunt family has made it very clear they love Arrowhead Stadium. And the Royals, I told you, and you only heard this on this show, I talked to people in Nashville who have this group that are exploring Major League Baseball, and they are not eyeing the Royals right now. They're not. I mean, I talked about this last week here on the show, that I talked to the people in Nashville, and they said that they are not at this point talking at all. And it wasn't like someone within the group. It was guys who would know on the reporting side, and they said the Royals are in no way on the table right now. So where are the Royals going to go? You think they're going to, if this thing gets voted down in 2 weeks, announce on Wednesday they're going to Nashville? They're going to Austin, Texas? I don't think that's the case. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote yes if you want to vote yes, but vote yes because you think it's a good investment of your tax dollars. Don't vote yes because you're scared and the teams have you bent over and you're all worried that, oh my goodness, they're going to run out of town. That's not close to being on the table right now. It can be an effective fear tactic and it might work, but it's not close to being on the table at this point. Now, the other question and idea that got brought up to me in the last couple of days was whether or not the city pressured the Royals to pick the Crossroads spot over the East Village. And I don't know that either way. But what I will say is this much. In my conversations with Mayor Lucas over the last several months on this, he clearly was a proponent of the Crossroads over the East Village, as time went on at least, because he realized that it would be a boon for Power and Light. And that Cordish, the company that owns Power and Light, that, by the way, is getting its butt kicked. I mean, the city's paying money, about $20 million a year, to subsidize Power and Light. It doesn't make money. It's a losing entity. And the city's basically saying, hey, we can help Power and Light by having the Royals right here instead of having a competing district, a competing entertainment district 5-10 minutes away in the East Village, which would be bad for Power and Light. So it's in the best interest of Cordish, who, built and runs Power and Light and also 1, 2, and 3 Light, and also in the best interest of the city to try to get some money back to help out Power and Light. So I can't speak to whether or not the city pressured the Royals, but I know this much. This site is much more preferred by the powers that be at City Hall for those reasons than the East Village. And don't discount, the lobbying of companies like Cordish in the conversation as well. I hate when the Marxist commies that want to destroy Kansas City stumble upon a salient point once in a while. But they did, and they have, so I'll at least give them a little bit of credit where it's due. Yesterday, there was a vote yes listening session here in town, and the KC tenants disrupted it. Now, listen, these people are bullies. They are thugs when it comes to their political tactics. There's nothing about them that I like, and frankly, as an organization, they will destroy this town if they have their way. The KC tenants are the ones who, basically bullied their way into getting the city council to pass an ordinance that says you can no longer do legitimate background checks on your tenants. And, if they have criminal histories or whatever, sorry. You're going to have to deal with that. That's who these people are. They hate the free market. They hate capitalism. And frankly, I believe they hate America. But when it comes to this stadium, when it comes to the tax coming up on April 2nd, they actually, pains me to say, at least make points that are worth hearing. It doesn't mean I'm supporting them. It doesn't mean I'm supporting their side. But this is what makes this issue coming up on April 2nd for the Chiefs and the Royals so weird and so interesting. You have, in many ways, far left progressives in agreement with maybe more traditional conservatives in saying, does it make sense to give our sales tax dollars to billionaire operations and organizations in the Chiefs and the Royals? Is that a good use of our money? Is that morally the right thing to do? So yesterday, at this Vote Yes listening session, the KC tenants do what they do far too often, and I hope they don't do it tonight. Once again, even if they make a good point, I hate how they go about their business, interrupting, screaming, yelling, all that nonsense. But one thing that was brought up yesterday was the issue of transparency.
People want to know, why should us working people subsidize billionaires? This is not about listening or hearing the people. Your process is a lie. I was at your last listening session, and my questions went unanswered. The people of Kansas City deserve transparency. I deserve transparency, and your fans deserve better
transparency. All right. Clearly not worth her Red Lobster money.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
Anyway, the broader point there on transparency is a fine one. The team has done a lot of preaching transparency, but it's fair to say they've lacked it at many turns. They've said they're being transparent, but they're not. It's like when you tell your spouse you're listening, and then you clearly aren't. And then she says, or he says, hey, can you grab me such and such? What? I thought you were listening. No, sorry. You know how that conversation goes. It happens all the time. So now we sit here and we point out the transparency really hasn't been there. The deadlines in large part have not been met. And who's to blame for that? I don't know. I don't really care. The Royals and the teams can worry about that. But this really has not been, I don't care if you're the biggest Yes fanboy in the world. There has not been a ton of transparency in any of this ahead of the vote on April 2nd. So KC tenants, who I can't stand, I mean, they are, I think, technically correct in saying transparency has been lacking, as much as I don't like their approach. And then the other point that was brought up during this listening session yesterday, which they interrupted, was the lack of current economic success around the stadiums.
Why don't you let Sarah from the
say that
Royals
they need to move elsewhere.
speak?
You know, and by the
Please.
way, 86% of economists do say that stadium deals do not return economic profit. So, if a stadium is so good for this city, why aren't there neighborhoods surrounding them the most prosperous in the city?
Hey, once again, I sit there and I say, okay, 50 years in, nothing's happened out at the current stadiums. In fact, let's be honest, most of what's around there is a dump. And we're supposed to sit here and say, well, by moving it, that will create great economic growth in that part of town. Will that be because of the stadium? Or will great economic growth happen in and around the crossroads because it's already happening? And it has been happening for the last several years. And it becomes an extension of downtown. Is it already happening and going to continue to happen, regardless of whether or not the stadium ends up there? That's a fair question to at least ask and pose. Now, you might say, hey, these are two different situations. The current stadium is kind of isolated in a parking lot with another stadium. That's different than putting a ballpark in a true downtown location with neighborhoods and everything else immediately around it. Maybe, but over 50 years, there has been no development out at the current stadiums. All right? So nothing's happened out there. If there was some economic development advantages in the area surrounding it, you would think it would have happened by now. I hate that the Kansas City tenants actually bring up a decent point, but they've at least brought up a decent point that is worth addressing and worth talking about. And that pains me to say. I don't want to say it, but these are the questions that are fair to ask. It doesn't mean no is the way to go. I brought up, and I've said this for the last several weeks, there are benefits to the yes and there are benefits to the no. I can see both sides. But when issues like this and angles like this get brought up by the no side, I'm like, okay, not the worst point. I don't like saying it, but it's not the worst point. Now, I guess this morning, KC tenants are doing, what are they doing, Mark? Some dopey rally somewhere around town, as I understand it. Some people are texting in about that.
Yeah, as they're opening up the polls for early voting, they have about a dozen people out there with their yellow shirts on.
They got their yellow shirts on? Mm-hmm. Think they've washed those things in 2 months?
I don't know.
Debatable. They probably stink. They're just smelly. And not just the shirts, the people, but whatever. Story for another day. They have clearly grown as an entity in this town. And in terms of Kansas City at large, that scares the daylights out of me. Because there's nothing they've really advocated for since KC Tenants has been an entity in Kansas City that has been good for business, good for economic growth, good for freedom, capitalism, and prosperity. Literally nothing. But that's what makes this whole topic very weird 2 weeks from today. They have a point. And their point is actually one that many in this audience who lean the other way would say makes some sense. And that's what's going to make this so fascinating coming up in 2 weeks with early voting starting today. 913-408-7957. That's the text line. That's the studio line on KCMO. This is on the text line, just came through. Pete, the stadium tax, in my opinion, has nothing to do with the stadium. I think John Sherman wants to develop downtown to make his money outside of the ball team. Well, the Royals have admitted that. They've admitted that they need revenue streams outside of baseball to compete in a small market. They've said, hey, there's no salary cap in baseball. It's not like the NFL. We need to get other revenue streams to pour that money into the team to get a competitive team on the field. That's the team's belief. But it's the old chicken or the egg argument. Do fans show up to drink your beer and eat your food because of the stadium? Or do they do it because, well, the team is good? Because if the team is good, suddenly you get more people in the ballpark, you got more concessions to sell, you got more revenues, and those revenues can also be dumped back into the team. Or do you need the commercial real estate? Do you need the residential real estate? Do you need all the bars and everything else? They'll tell you yes on the latter, but I certainly think that comes down to the chicken or the egg conversation. 913-408-7957 as we get to the 9 o'clock hour here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM.